What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining in to another episode of Still Positive. I am fully vaccinated. Welcome. I'm very glad to be here. Very appreciative of the mini COVID that I received after the second shot. The first one, I was like, it's nothing. And then after that, the second shot, it just came out of nowhere. Like, I was not expecting such real flu symptoms. I think I underestimated the effect for majority of the day. I was just laying around the couch with my dog and sweating it out, not taking Advil because I'm super strong. And then not feeling it, did not love that mini COVID. So sorry to anyone that experienced COVID because just that little dose of it was real. Like I definitely felt the effects, and I can't imagine feeling it for much longer without any relief. So thoughts to all of you still fighting the disease, and let's kick COVID's ass, right? It's a new day. Anyway, today we are talking to Maya. Maya is a survivor of sarcoma, and she is living her daily life with limb loss, and she is so badass. I love her. Just my little conversation with her was so fulfilling, and I really just was inspired by the work that she does, her multi-talented life. She's really just spreading her awareness of limb loss and kicking ass. Definitely make sure to check out her Instagram at the end of the episode or whenever during the episode. Do it when you want. Live your own life. Do your thing. I highly suggest following her though, because she's such a beautiful, amazing person. I can't wait for you to hear this episode. Enjoy. Let's be real. People love to gloss over chronic conditions or disabilities with a fleeting comment like, just be positive, or a fleeting insult like, kale will cure you. This is a podcast for when you face a different reality, knowing that positivity isn't a magic wand that's going to cure everything, but a flashlight in the dark that we may or may not have batteries to. Living with a chronic illness or disability makes you feel different, and your difference could be noticeable to others or not, but either can sometimes make you feel invisible. I'm here to tell you that your experience is valid and shared by others in the dark. Positivity is not the missing puzzle piece that's going to solve your life's puzzle, but it can be a beautiful tool that can help you grow, and sharing those experiences can make us grow together. Of course, I'm really excited that you're here. You are the first person that I've talked to that has had cancer on the show, so I'm really excited to talk about that.
Yeah.
First, just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I will be 28 tomorrow. I am from a town or a city just outside of Hartford called New Britain in Connecticut. Born and raised, I've been there my entire life. I went to the state college there, UConn, and got my degree in journalism and poli-sci. And I am currently, in addition to trying to launch my business online, I'm also studying for the LSATs at night. And then another thing I do beside my other job is I work for a company called Drizzly, and I work in their customer service department. So that is like a quick roundup of what I do and who I am.
Whoa, that's a lot. But you gotta make it work, you know. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there that you could be doing. So as long as you're happy and like making it work, then that's all that
Yeah.
matters.
And I was just going to say, in regards to the topic of cancer, I am a cancer survivor who celebrated their 10th year in remission this past January. So I was diagnosed when I was, thank you, I was diagnosed when I was 14. It was a rare type of sarcoma in my right arm. I had radiation treatment initially, but by the time I had finished the treatment, it had already spread to my lungs. So I had a series of lung resection surgeries, and at 15, I entered a clinical trial that ended up being the one that worked and had results. But in order to have clean margins and just remain cancer-free, I had my amputation in 2011 after it came back for the second time. So yeah, and I've been cancer-free ever since.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
And what you said you had a lung, what was it? What kind of surgery did you have for your lungs?
Yeah, so it's a lung resection. So it essentially means they just take out the diseased parts of the lung or cut out clean margins around these areas where tumor or disease is found. So entire lower lobe of my right lung and section of my left. So there's some
Wow.
sizable chunks.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so intense. Were you like terrified going into that surgery?
um, the funny thing is I at the time like had a my parents had gotten me involved in a few of these like resource or like support groups. And just like talking to the other kids, it was kind of like we had like this joke that we were not super aware of what was going on just because of how much, the medication and all of that affects, like you just have constant brain fog. And then the pain meds you're taking, it's like very sort of hard to be totally conscious of what's going on. And I also think it's a part of your brain just trying to cope with what's going on. But I don't um, remember a ton. I remember having a chest tube, which was absolutely awful. I can sympathize or empathize with anybody that's had to have a chest tube or stoma in. They're very uncomfortable to sort of like move about the world with. But aside from that, I don't remember a ton. I recently, in the last year, started looking at some of my old journals, which has been like an adventure in itself, just trying to figure out like what was going through my head or what was I thinking at the time. But yeah, I just started that this year, so I'm sure I'll have more of an answer eventually. But at the time, it just sort of seemed like, it was just part of the routine, just, another surgery, another, trip to the hospital, try to figure out what's going on and how to make it better.
Totally. And you're in such shock when you're going through those things. And you're right. The pain meds that you're on and just the whole experience is so hard to be present within because it's such a 360 from where you were at that it's like, I'm just doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. It feels like a job. Like I'm just doing it until all of a sudden you're like, something stops or like you have to do something. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what is going on here? Like,
Yes, that exactly. Just like going through the motions, like awesome, like okay, made it through another day, kind of thing.
right, right. And how old were you when you were going through? You said it relapsed, so you had it 2 times. You went to
Yeah, so initially diagnosed at 14, I relapsed for the first time at 15. So I had that initial radiation surgery. They thought it had worked because it had shrunk the tumor and I had the surgery to remove it. So kind of this very small, like, grace period where we thought that that might be the end, but that it had already spread to my lymph nodes into my lungs um, around my 15th birthday. And then I had a second came back a second time in 2011 when I had the amputation, came back in my right arm.
wow. Oh man, that's so unfortunate. I hate that it seems like you're over the hump and then it just like comes smack back in your face. I had that happen as well. It was really it's so devastating because it's like and then you start blaming yourself like I could have done XYZ better. I don't know. You always think like it's your fault. Even from square one, you're like, it's my fault I did this. But like it's not true, you know. It's just hard
Yeah,
to accept that, you went through all this and then now it's back. And that's really frustrating. So I had to deal with that.
yeah. And I can absolutely empathize. I think that at 17, it was definitely more when I had when it came back the second time, it was more of just like, okay, like I thought I had done everything. I thought I had like gone through chemo and like done all the hard stuff. And now it's happening again. Like, what is going on? Like, this is like so unfair. And of course, you're in, teenage, like angsty mode on top of that. Like, that extra added layer just felt like the whole woe is me, why me kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Did you have a sort of period of time where you were just sort of sitting in the why is me sort of moment?
Yes, I would say that lasted a long time. I would say, especially with it coming back the second time, because again, I did not know a ton about cancer. Like, I don't remember growing up anybody in my family or anybody close to me having it. It seemed like just this very distant, like foreign concept. I think maybe like the topic was covered on maybe like one of like the kid or teen TV shows that I watched, and all I understood is that okay, like you lose your hair, like that's scary enough for like a teenage girl. So it was like I had no other idea or way to understand this thing that was happening to me until it was happening. So I think the whole why is me definitely was a really heavy question to think about the second time I came back. The first time, again, it seemed like, okay, if I do everything right, this is going to be over. But then when I came back the second time, and then just that fear too that, am I going to have to kind of look over my shoulder for the rest of my life kind of thing. Um, but definitely the why is me was a question I thought about a lot. Like again, thinking about like, okay, is there something wrong with my body? Like this is like rare. I don't know anybody else that has it even within that small peer group I had in the hospital. It's like we all had very different forms of cancer, and a lot of them had very common, like they had specific support groups for either lymphoma um, or leukemia, which were like, the most common. Those are all of them, my, friends or people that I was able to talk to or relate to. In that way had. So there was even still that difference, like, okay, like I don't even have like what these other kids have. So I have, something completely different, a completely different animal, and it just felt sometimes isolating again because it's just like they didn't have really specific support groups for the type of cancer I had, and a lot of my friends, in particular, the two women who I or girls that I got close with, had leukemia. So even when we started talking about the option to have the amputation, I'm like, wait, 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 wait. Nobody else I know had to have this done. So yeah, it was something I thought about a lot.
Yeah. And what sort of support groups did you find? Was it specific to sarcoma after you went through the second diagnosis?
Yeah, so it was primarily, there was a specific group at the hospital I was treated at, Connecticut Children's Medical Center, where it was basically because it's not necessarily small, but it was basically the eighth floor crew. So it's everybody on the eighth floor was being treated for some type of cancer or autoimmune disorder. So we all sort of just hung out because we either were allowed to hang out with each other because we had low counts and everybody on that floor had gone through like precautions to be sort of quote unquote safe or cleared for that. When I did sort of open up my like network in that regard, it was with this group called the Sunshine Kids, another group that the hospital partnered with, and they do like a trip every year. And I remember when it was like floated as an idea, I was like, oh my God, yes, like an opportunity to get out of the hospital, like be quote unquote normal, like
Yeah.
for a period of time. I was in and out of high school. I went in for freshman year, part of the year, and then I ended up being homeschooled for sophomore, junior, and senior year, homeschooled. So I was like so excited to be around other kids. But again, it was other kids who sort of had a shared experience with me. And even in that, there was maybe only one other girl that I remember who had a sarcoma, and she again didn't have an amputation, but she had very like serious resection surgeries to remove large parts, of her organs.
Wow.
And had radiations, radiation burns and all that stuff. So again, like seeing this other person who again had something quote unquote similar, but still not sort of not the same sense of, I guess, community or even more shared experience on a smaller level that people with leukemia or lymphoma had. Because again, that was everybody I met had either one of those two forms of cancer because they're very common.
And growing up at such a young age with such a serious disease, do you feel that you've had sort of, even at this point, even being like 10 years out of it, do you feel that you've had some sort of side effects that you still notice after treatments?
Yes. So one of the great things that Connecticut Children does is they have something called the STAR Clinic, which is a clinic that follows survivors from the pediatric oncology ward. So it's kind of got, it's a little disjunct after, especially after the pandemic. But at its height, it was just a really great resource to have because they basically did like full body evaluation. Like I remember going in, I was like freaking out, like putting off the appointment, like thinking like, okay, like I finally like, am this many years out of this many years in remission, I'm this many years away from it. Like, why do I have to go do this? But after conversations with my parents, my doctor, like, okay, like this is just part of it. Like, It's the part that nobody talks about. Like, it doesn't end just be when, you're the goal of X amount of years in remission that's required to be considered in remission or without disease. So I just remember being terrified, like, okay, like, what are they going to tell me? Like, is there going to be something worse that I don't know about that could be worse than what I went through? And I just remember going, and they did a full body exam, like, let me know what long term side effects are going to be with my heart based on the chemotherapy medications I took, long term side effects on my bones, my teeth, um, my liver, my kidneys, just sort of things I can do um, to get ahead of it, to make sure I'm taking care of myself, you know, head to toe, and just being aware that, okay, like, I need to be taking like precautions in terms of like, maybe somebody thinking about osteoporosis would have to think about in their, 50s. I need to start thinking about that now. And then the one big one as a woman, of course, is they had the sort of the conversation around fertility, because I had chemotherapy during my, years that I would have been getting my menstrual cycle. There's long-term side effects in terms of that. So actually this year I'll be starting the process to freeze my eggs so that I have sort of a, some security blanket or security in that regard. But just things I didn't know about, because again, I think there should be more conversations about it, or there should just be more, I guess, of a network or support around what happens. Because in some ways, I found both positively and negatively that it can be, you know, sometimes not as bad, but sometimes almost as bad as, going through the treatment itself and sort of realizing that, okay, the effects of this are far reaching. It doesn't just end when treatment ends.
And that's interesting that you had follow-up support like that, like with an explanation and things like that. I have been looking for things that were similar, but I just end up Googling and getting all of these weird ideas of what's going to happen. But I think that it's because maybe I'm still in treatment, I don't get like the, hey, this might happen, because they're always like, you're on treatment. So, like, the side effects of this. But like long term, I've had a whole bunch of different chemos, and all of them are going to react different down the line. But like I said, they're probably just focusing on like what's happening now, and then they'll like tell me about that later. But it's still like, I'm still like, I've been going through it for quite some time, so I'm focusing on other aspects of my body that are changing. And you know just the fact that I'm older now, like my body aches in different ways, and I'm like, it's something with the cancer. Like, I'm telling my doctor, like, I'm so achy getting out of bed, and she's like, that's normal, you're just 30 now. Like, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely have days like that where I'm like, oh no, like my ankle is hurting like a certain way, or like and they're just like, no, that's part of, and it's again, like, you still have that fear no matter how many years out. Or I mean, I commend you. You are absolutely phenomenal. Having still going through it now. My heart and everything is with you. You are amazing.
Right.
But it's, I mean, it doesn't matter how much time passes. It kind of is just, unfortunately, just that thing have, it's always in the back of your minds. Like, and I think that a part of being a survivor is you learn to live with it. It becomes less of something that dictates what you do and when, and more of just like, okay, like, yeah, I have this fear. It's rational because my body went through this, traumatic experience. It's just trying to look out for me, and instead of it being this like thing that prevents you from, getting up in the morning, or just, continuing on with your life, which I feel like it was for me for a long time. Just that fear, like, what's the point? Like, it could come back anytime and wreak havoc on my life.
Right. Why even try to like set goals and do anything? Because I feel like sometimes there's like a point where like I'll just set goals, and every goal will just be like smashed back in my face. But life just in general has a way of doing that. So expecting that when something good happens, something bad is going to happen right after is sort of just, it's not healthy to like really, even though sometimes it may happen, but like it's not because something good happened. It's just like the way that life works.
Yeah.
But it's traumatizing. And especially at such a young age going through it, it is something that, will always be in the back of your mind, unfortunately. But in the meantime, is there anything that you are really specific about focusing on for health?
Yes, I've recently tried to be really intentional and just disciplined around journaling because I feel like it was a huge outlet for me throughout treatment. Because again, like there were times where, like, again, like I just didn't have anybody to talk to, or just, felt incredibly like alone, even if I was surrounded like by nurses who would like sit by my bed and watch TV, or even my parents, or my siblings. And it was just a way for me to write down and acknowledge what I was feeling, instead of it just being like a shout into the void kind of thing, which it felt like a lot of the times. It's just like nobody's listening. I'm just another kid with, with cancer. This happens to millions of people. And you kind of just get into that, like, I you just need somewhere to put it because it gets really heavy after a long time. So journaling is something that I've started to do. Just also being really mindful of trying to be more active, and um, eating a lot cleaner. Like, I don't restrict anything I eat, because there's one thing I learned is that life is way too short to be like on a diet. Especially if you've had cancer, you're just like, absolutely not. Like, if I want something, I'm gonna have it, but it's more of just um in moderation for me, especially as I get older and have goals around, again, like my fertility and all that stuff, and wanting to make sure that my body is in the best shape to take on whatever's next.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And it's tough. I mean, I wish that I tried being like uber healthy and like trying to cut out everything that anyone says. But at the end of the day, I was just like, I can't do this. I'm miserable in both aspects. Like, food is just like my comfort, like my
Yeah.
joy. I need it. So,
Yeah.
in moderation, definitely. And, just the little things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, like, as like a teenager, I would, again, like we said, like go online and like look up stuff, and I'd be like, "Oh my god, like I shouldn't be eating this," or like all these articles of people saying, "Well, this food causes cancer." I'd be like, "Oh my god, like so I can't, like, not only am I sick and I'm like throwing up and, just achy and in pain and all this, but now I can't even have, you know, Sour Patch Kids because people are saying that sugar, like, yeah, is gonna like make your sarcoma come back." And I just be like, "Oh my god."
It's so
So yeah,
annoying.
it's yeah. So everybody has an opinion about it. I learned that very early on, and I was like, okay, like if my doctor says that it's fine and I want to do it, then that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. No, definitely. And it was probably like 2 or 3 years into my treatments that someone told me that sugar causes cancer and quote unquote. And I was getting like ice cream after like a rough day, and I was just sitting there by myself. Some woman comes up to me and she's talking to me and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" I was like, "I'm just getting dessert. I just need it today." And she goes, "Oh, you shouldn't be getting dessert." And I was like, "What?" She was like, "Sugar causes cancer." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, and then I had to sit there in front of her and like eat it. I was like, "I'm not eating this. Like, I've been looking forward to this all day." None of my doctors said anything. They didn't say like, they said, "Eat whatever you want." I was eating whatever I wanted. Like,
Yeah, no, same, same. There was a Friendlies, which is like our like New England like ice cream chain across from the hospital, and I would like request that after almost every, chemotherapy session, because it was the thing I looked forward to. I'm like, there's no way I'm listening to like this weird article from like I don't even know where. Like, that's fine, they think that, but again, like, it made me happy.
totally. And that's all you need. Something to make you happy and get you through these really tough times for sure. So tell me
Yeah.
about how you started getting into, do you do some modeling, you said?
So so I use it like, so I always feel weird like saying that I am, because I feel like there's, I guess, like just in context, usually it's assumed that you're signed with an agency. So I'm not signed, is what I should say. I should say that I have done some modeling. I have done a couple of brand partnerships via Instagram, creating content for them. But yes, so it is something that I've gotten into recently. It is something that I've liked to do um, from like a young age. Like I almost like cringed a couple weeks ago finding like some old pictures, just like on a Polaroid camera, the disposable camera pictures that had been developed of me like at 8 or 9 years old, just having like a full on like photo shoot, like very 2000s, like 90s kid in the backyard, like powder blue, like
Yeah.
pigtails, very trying to channel like Bubbles from the Powerpuff Girls.
So
Um, so it's something that I've always liked to do, photography and taking pictures. And then because my degree is in journalism, I did a ton of that in school, like doing websites and also taking my own photos for stories that I wrote. So it's always been something that I've enjoyed doing.
that's amazing. And so did you reach out to partnerships or did they reach out to you?
So a mix of both. I would say I'm trying to think, when did I posted, so my first post on my like um Instagram page, Maya ish, um was, I believe, summer of 2020, and I was absolutely terrified. Like I remember like being in the backyard. The intention was, or what I anticipated doing was just taking a couple pictures with my prosthetic on and like this dress I had just gotten. Um, for context, I was working at the time at Nordstrom part time, and I mean it's fashion, it's retail, so I was constantly around fashion, constantly around clothes, and I just had a lot of pride in being able to dress up and sort of feel like my quote unquote old self. But it was very much centered and tied to my prosthetic. So I remember taking pictures in the backyard, and I remember calling my best friend, and I'm just like, none of these are coming out like, how I want them to. Like, I'm just not having a good shoot day. I had this plan to launch it and then start to reach out to brands from there, but I was like, it's just not going well. Maybe I'll try again, in a month kind of thing. And she was like, okay, like, you're probably not going to like this, but I think you should just like take your prosthetic off and take the pictures without it. And I remember like being on the other end of the phone and just hearing like like a record like stop, like, what did you just say? Like, why on earth would I ever do that? Like, that is totally like, just no. I only take it off like around my family, close friends, like when I'm out in public taking photos. I had gone to extreme lengths to sort of conceal, or just blend in, for lack of a better word. So I ended up, caving after we like went back and forth on the phone, and I just posted the picture after um, I had taken them, and I wrote basically something I'd had in my head for a long time, of just sort of feeling like, I had been living just not fully as myself, and sort of like concealing this part of myself, and for lack of a better word, doing myself a disadvantage and trying to live in that like just very concealed like space. So from there, the like outpour of like love and support I got, I was like, okay, like, well, maybe I can do this one other time, or maybe I'll try it one more time. And then it just became something that I was like, okay, like, why hadn't I done this like, in 2011? So from there, the first brand that reached out to me um, was actually recently, that first like big brand. I worked with a couple of small brands who also reached out to me. So smaller, like female owned businesses, either through Etsy or stuff like that, asking me to wear their stuff on Instagram. It had been probably a split, so like 5 or 6 companies I can think of where either I reached out or they reached out to me. And again, it was just sort of like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. Like, what can I lose? Like, the ones that I reached out to were brands that I'm like a huge Etsy addict. So they were brands that I had been familiar with, and had bought their stuff anyway. So I'm like, hey, like, can I create content for you? Like, this is something basically I'm starting out on. I see that you're like a newer, smaller business too. Like, can we work together? And it went great. And from there, the first big brand that reached out to me was a brand called Say Beauty, which is carried in Sephora, and they asked me to do um, a basically application video for one of their new products. And from there, I was like, okay, like, you know, it sort of gave me I think the wind beneath my wings for for lack of a better like term. It just like gave me sort of the like just like hype that I needed to be like, okay, like I can do this. Like, okay, this can actually be like a thing. Um, and I felt great. Like it was amazing to be in front of the camera and think that somebody seeing this is going to be like, oh my God, like she only has one arm and she is putting on her makeup and has a kick ass outfit on and is a part of this beauty campaign. That's awesome. So I just, again, like just again, would use that momentum from the next thing to go to the next thing to the next thing and just think about it or let the doubts or the questioning thoughts come afterwards, like after I'd already hit send on the email asking if another person wanted to work with me.
Yeah, that's what you gotta do. Just like send it and then be like,
Yeah,
all right, now I'll think about it.
yeah, yeah. So I just kept going again, like just let like even if they said, hey, like we're not looking, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Like before I even read this email, rest of this email, let me send the next two emails and we'll go from there. And I've had somewhat good success. Again, like it is competitive, so there is that part, but I mean, it hasn't stopped me from trying so far. So I'm excited to see where it goes next.
Well, I think your photos are absolutely beautiful. I love all of them, and I think they're
Thank you.
so well done. Just like the positioning and the lighting and just the whole vibe of it is really, really good. So I think you definitely have a knack for it for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And so you're building your own brand. What are you looking to sell for your brand?
So my hope down the line is one of the things that when talk to brands or I reach out to them, is just this idea of diversity and inclusion. Like I tell them a little bit about my story. Like when I first had my amputation, the only other person I had ever known, that was an amputee was my grandmother who lost both of her legs to diabetes. Outside of that, I think maybe like a war veteran and like Forrest Gump. Like outside of that, like I had no rep, and those aren't people that are in my age group or look like me. Um, so I didn't know like this was a thing people live with and have like lives that are quote unquote fulfilling. Like it was either you're a war vet or you're somebody that's sick and you're very sick and you don't really recover from that. Um, so I'm honest with them. I'm like the first time I saw somebody where these two experiences, and then again, like go and get fitted for my prosthetic, like there weren't any people, um, there in the office or on the brochures that looked like me. And I was like, when I get DMs from people all over the place, they're just like, oh my God, I didn't know, like I've never seen like somebody like you before. Like that's so, it's so cool to see that you're doing this. I don't know anybody else that does, or there'll be, another amputee who's like, holy crap, like I did not know like you could like tailor your own clothes or like do all this stuff. Like that's really cool. So I'm just always grateful for the people that do reach out. And then I'm also um constantly thinking about the other women who are I mean, there's millions of amputees all over the place. How many of them have gone years without seeing anybody that looks like them, and that what that kind of does to you, um, and sort of figuring out your own journey or self worth, without really seeing again anybody that looks like you. It kind of puts a damper on things. So, in terms of what I say to brands when I reach out about what I can offer, it's I want to bring visibility to your brand and show that if you're selling to people, like I'm a person, people that are amputees are people too, and if you want them to buy your products, you have to show that and that also opens it up to people who are disabled. Like you have to show that you cater to people that look like them. So that's the one thing I prioritize, and then from there, my hope is to eventually do once I've found a formula that works, is do consulting work because I think that allowing anybody who has gone any sort of um, trauma or hardship, whether it's disability, cancer, chronic illness, like those stories need to be told. Like I always um, saw value just the way I was brought up in the work that I've chosen to do and my degree working like in journalism for a few years, the value in stories, like, and outside of selling something, it's just what makes us as humans being like, okay, like I can connect with that person, I can empathize with that person. And being able to tell your story is something extremely valuable that I think more people should have the opportunity to do.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. And I think that your story is so beautiful. And I mean, it became beautiful from something really unfortunate. And that's why I wanted to reach out to you. I just think that you've made it to a point where you feel, it looks like you feel so strong in your body and yourself. That was really inspiring to me. Did it take you to a point where you feel like you do love yourself in this way?
So that's a good question, but also a hard question. So I think that the honest answer is that it's 50% faking it till you make it and 50% believing it. And that's the honest truth, because there are days like again where I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, like there is again nobody who looks like me doing this." Like I don't even have like, an instruction manual on how this is supposed to work or like what it's supposed to look like. And it, again, brings in those sort of ideas about self doubt. But then there's the other half where, my brain will instantly be like, okay, well, yeah, you are the only one that looks like you right now, but that doesn't, that's your advantage. That's your, the thing that sets you apart. And it's like something to be grateful for. So yeah, I would definitely say a part of it is faking it till you make it, telling yourself the things you want to hear, you want to believe constantly until your brain starts to be like, okay, that's not that crazy, or that's not that ridiculous to think that, I am lovable, I am valuable, I am beautiful. But it is practice, and it's practice every single day.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's like a muscle you have to exercise. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm like, I already did the work, like I did that already. But then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I need to like dive back in. It's like it's time for a refresh here.
Yeah.
But I think that I also was really in love with your tailoring, and you were talking about it a bit before. You do it yourself?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
sick.
I learned I learned to sew in middle school. It was kind of like a extracurricular that was offered at the magnet school I went to, and I remember like all the kids sort of being like, "Oh, like why do we have to learn like to sew? Like this is so boring." And I'm over here like, "Okay, like I finished like project A and B. What's next?" Because it was just the ability to transform something into like the two dimension into something that I could wear or use, and it just being another way to express myself. So in high school, I started to sketch like my own designs, and I would work with a local seamstress. And then from there, I'm like, okay, like try to look at what she was doing, how she put things together, asking her questions when I would go into fittings, like, okay, well, like, how would you, if I wanted to do this, like, how would I make that happen, kind of thing. So understanding or basically figuring it out in a very non-traditional way, basically being like, okay, like how does A and B go together, and can you show me like what you did to work backwards, and then just replicating it. Um, so I started to design a few of my own things before I had my amputation, and then afterwards, it was definitely something I had put aside because I didn't think I could do it anymore. I was originally right-handed, so I did about a year of occupational therapy, just learning how to do everything over again. And that started a little bit before I had my amputation, actually, because I started to develop severe lymphedema in my right arm. So it was incredibly swollen and painful to use. So I had to begin to make the switch before I actually had my actual amputation. Um, and sewing again was just one of those things I thought like, okay, like, it's something I used to do. Maybe there'll be a day where I'm confident enough to design clothes, without my prosthetic, but I never thought I'd be able to do it on my own. And then during quarantine, actually, out of just sheer boredom, we all were sort of experiencing being in complete lockdown, away from everybody, not allowed to do anything other than like watch Tiger King and endless Netflix shows. I was like, okay, like what do I have to lose by like buying a sewing machine online and just like, you know, watching a couple YouTube videos and figuring it out. And it completely just snowballed from there. And by then I was like, okay, I don't even need to really utilize the seamstress anymore except for really complicated things. And even then, like I'm still having those conversations where I'm trying to figure out like, okay, how did you do this and how can I replicate it? So yeah, it's brought me a lot of joy, and just being able to take something that I love to do, I didn't think what I was going to be able to do, back in my own hands again.
Wow, that's so cool. It definitely shows that you've worked with seamstress before because those clothes are so nicely tailored. Like, you make
Thank
me
you.
like I always want to go get my stuff tailored, but then I'm like, man, I like never do it. But looking at your pictures, I'm like, I need to go get my stuff tailored because it does. It looks so good. And it's just like, that's how clothes are made to fit. Like, clothes are not supposed to be ready to wear. I'm sorry. Like, it's convenient for sure, but like, clothes are meant to be made for you. So I love that.
Yes, I have always been a staunch supporter of tailoring. I just think it like takes everything to the next level, and it just makes it feel like it's yours. And I also feel like, also from like a sustainability, just makes you want to keep it. Like you invest in stuff that actually makes you happy and that you want to keep for a long time if it fits you.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, what's your favorite designer? I
Ooh.
know. It's so hard.
That is a hard question. Okay. So right off the bat, just because I used to just like fawn over like magazines or like old like coffee table books with his work in it, Tom Ford, just because he very much understands just the female physique, and just every time I see one of his pieces, the woman wearing it is just like, I mean, just rocking it, like just complete like out of body, like, oh my god, like this is it, like this is the outfit kind of thing,
Yes.
like all eyes on you if you were to wear this anywhere. um so yeah, that's who it comes to mind. I'm sure I would have way more in-depth answers if I had like more time to think about it, but
I'm
off the
sorry.
top of my head, definitely Tom Ford.
Yeah, no, he's great. I definitely love all the classic designers. I've been for the past few years. I started with Miu Miu, and then I went from like early 20s, and then I started to like think about Prada, and I was just they've
Mm,
been churning out some really good collections. So I've been really
yeah.
loving them.
Yes. I'm also a big YSL fan. I very much love Eddie Slimane and Phoebe Philo of Celine when she was there. That was
Mm,
um, one of my favorite tenures at a fashion house. She did amazing. So yeah,
so good.
yeah.
That's awesome. Do you also do some styling work too?
Yeah, so I did, again, this was like in my post post, I'm trying to think how old I was when I started. This was a little bit out of high school. So I was still trying to figure out like how I could relate to it. And again, I was like, okay, this is so far removed from me because I just could not picture, again, like me styling myself with, my new equipment. That I was like, okay, I'll just, I love fashion, I love clothes, like I will do it for somebody else. And I remember working with a couple of friends who had started their own businesses. There was one of my friends in particular, Brittany. She is a singer and artist, and she had a couple of gigs after high school and into college. And she was like, "Hey, like, do you want to come work for me? Like, do you want to style me for her shows?" And I had so much fun doing it. But it eventually, again, got to that point where it's like, okay, like I want to do this, but is it enough? Like I still feel this, calling that, this is something I like for myself too. So why can't I? And again, I just continued to challenge myself on the idea that I couldn't because of my new body image. And I was just like, I'm going to do it.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. And I think that it's really cool to see that growth. And I can't wait to see what you end up doing next, honestly,
Thank
where your
you.
journey shows. Yeah. And so throughout all of your experience with, cancer and going through everything with losing your arm and just growing from that, do you find that you can still be positive in your daily routine?
Yeah. I think that one of the things I've learned to do is, and again, it something that is not a foreign concept to me that was introduced to me around the time I was diagnosed with this idea of being grateful. And it, again, like it feels kind of like kitsch or like just cheesy, like when somebody first mentioned it to you, it's just like, okay, like, yeah, like I'm not ungrateful. Like I don't, you know, I'm not unhappy with the stuff that I have in my life or the things I have to be happy about, but actually practicing and saying that, I am happy to be, 10 years in remission. I am happy to be able to tailor my own clothes. Like I'm happy to have found this community online that is so, uplifting and supportive of my new identity, the new way I'm able to see myself, and put myself out there. So I think that, again, like there are days where, I have really bad PTSD from everything that happens and it feels like, okay, like I don't have a lot to be positive about. But as I've gotten older, I have been able to recognize that those days get fewer and farther between, even though, again, like there could be a time they come back and I'm absolutely devastated for like weeks at a time. And I'm just like, oh, this is like such a bad, you know, depressive, like, mode. And I just, don't have a lot to be positive about, but it's all about the rebound. And I found that every time I've sort of had that lapse in belief or, thought that, okay, again, like I don't have anything to be positive or grateful about, like life is still, can be challenging. It also is in so many ways just, I mean, it's beautiful for lack of a better word. Like I used to constantly like sort of run like this parallel in my head where I would think about what my life would have been like if I didn't have cancer and I didn't have my amputation, and it was like just suffocating because I just to constantly think about what your life could have been alongside the life that you're living and it just not matching up to what you had anticipated it being. And I remember there was it was actually recently a couple weeks ago. I remember waking up and I was like, I had not like it felt like such a foreign thought, but I was like, I would not change anything. And I think that's the first time I've ever said that to myself, that I wouldn't change anything.
Wow. And that's such a great place to be, but it takes mountains of roller coasters of emotion just to get to that place. But I'm so glad that you've gotten there, and I'm so glad that you feel comfortable sharing with us because I really love just seeing you and being so proud of yourself. It feels just amazing to watch. So thank you so much for wanting to talk to me and share all of your experience with us.
Yes, it was an absolute honor from yeah, exact one survivor to another. I'm beyond honored and thank you so much.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. So happy that Maya wanted to jump on the show and talk to us about her experience living with limb loss, being a survivor of sarcoma, and just making limb loss look fucking badass. I could not imagine myself in your shoes, but I really appreciate you sharing a little bit of it because it is so beautiful. And I'm glad that you can feel grateful and beautiful and strong in your body because it's been through a lot, and illness and disabilities can break us down to our bottom rock, but also your ability to build from that and regrow is so challenging and so beautiful. And I just love hearing about it. So thank you again to Maya for jumping on. Make sure to follow Maya on Instagram at MayaIsh and just keep a lookout for what she's got coming next. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to stay in touch with Still Positive and be aware when the next episode's coming out. I can't wait for you to hear the next episode. Make sure to reach out if you want to be a part of Still Positive, and keep a lookout by subscribing and staying sick. I really appreciate your time and energy as always. Stay safe.